Do you have an unreasonable and overwhelming response to certain objects or things in your life that pose little or no danger to you? Does this overwhelming response cause so much fear and anxiety that it leads you to having avoidance behaviors? If you've answered yes to these questions, it is highly probable that you're having some sort of a phobia, which is a form of anxiety disorder. So stick around for today's video where we will discuss this in more detail and you can learn what it is and what you can do about it. A phobia is an overwhelming and debilitating form of fear that is geared towards a certain object, place, feeling, situation, or even an animal. The fears are so pronounced to them, even though in real life that situation doesn't require that kind of a response. A phobia can cause an individual to circulate their life around it, meaning that they tend to avoid those certain situations or objects that can cause these individuals to feel that amount of distress. Common categories of phobias include situations such as flying or that of being in a closed space, nature such as thunderstorms and heights, animals such as dogs or spiders, blood, syringes, and injury which lead the individual to fear medical procedures, choking, seeing clowns, vomiting, and losing control. Each specific phobia has a specific term that is attached to it. So for example, a fear of spiders is arachnophobia. A fear of flying is aviophobia. A fear of getting into elevators, elevatophobia. The fear of heights, acrophobia. The fear of closed spaces, claustrophobia. The fear of being in open public spaces, agoraphobia. No matter what type of phobia you are going through, the common signs and symptoms include an immediate, intense form of fear and anxiety when the object or situation is close to you, or even thinking about it causes an immediate response of distress within you. You are quite aware that the situation or object doesn't require that response, but you feel powerless to control that fear. There is worsening anxiety when a certain situation is thought of coming closer to you in due time, or if you are in a physical proximity to the object of your distress. You do everything possible to avoid that form of anxiety, or you face that fear with intense amount of distress within you. You will also see physical symptoms such as sweating, rapid heartbeat, a tight chest. You may feel nauseated or dizzy. Much is still unknown about the causes of phobias, but the most common three causes include a negative experience where you faced an object or a situation that caused you to have an intense amount of anxiety, fear, and panic. It could be due to a learned environment where a relative or a family member had a phobia and you kind of picked up on it and started to mimic those behaviors. And finally, brain functioning, where certain changes in your brain functioning can cause you to develop a phobia. Some of the common risk factors for the development of phobias include your age. Some of the phobias are known to develop as early as age 10 and could also take effect later on in life. Your relatives. If you have seen somebody living with the phobia, it is not unnatural for people to start mimicking those behavior and cause a learned fear within themselves. Your temperament. If you are a shy person and tend to get affected by everything happening around you, then the chances of developing phobia become higher. Your own learned experiences, such as having a negative response to an object or a situation, can cause you to develop a phobia. And finally, learning about it from somebody else, a negative experience from somebody else, can cause you to fear a certain situation and object just because you heard about somebody else's response. If you're finding this video informative so far, then do give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. If you are looking for an anxiety coach, then do reach out to me. My link is in the description box below. Some of the complications of phobias include social isolation, because these individuals tend to avoid anything that causes them to have the intense amount of fear, anxiety, and panic, leading them to have their lives affected in many realms, such as academics, professional, and even issues with relationships. They can develop mood disorders in conjunction with phobias, such as depression and anxiety disorders. They become dependent on substances such as drugs and alcohol to overcome that fear of living with such an intense amount of anxiety all the time. And finally, they can also have suicidal thoughts because they start to feel helpless and hopeless. In order to get a formal diagnosis of a specific phobia, your trained mental health professional or a psychiatrist will do a psychological evaluation on you. They will ask you questions on what exactly you feel, how severe is your anxiety, what are your symptoms, what are your thoughts associated with that anxiety, and what are the behaviors as a consequence of those thoughts and emotions. They will use the criteria given by the Diagnostic Statistical Manual provided by the American Psychiatric Association to help give you a proper diagnosis of your specific phobia. The treatment for phobias is more focused on the avoidance type of behavior patterns that an individual develops, rather than focusing on the cause of the phobia. The overall goal of the treatment is to help the individual improve the overall quality of their life. The most common used psychotherapy is exposure therapy, where there is a graduated response to a certain stimuli in the individual's life. So for example, if a person is afraid of elevators, the therapist may have a graduated way of having this individual face that situation. And this could include thinking of an elevator, then looking at the pictures of an elevator, then standing next to the elevator, then getting into the elevator, going one floor down, then several floors up and down, and finally to get into an elevator where there are a few people present. The next form of therapy that therapists like to use is cognitive behavior therapy, where the connection between your thoughts and emotions and how your behaviors have shaped will be discussed. It will focus on how a negative thought loop was created and what you can do to change that negative thought loop into a more positive thought loop. Generally speaking, psychotherapy is enough for the treatment of a phobia. But because there's such a range in the severity of the symptoms that an individual goes through, your trained mental health professional and psychiatrist could have you being put on certain medications that help control those symptoms. Now, my hope with this video was that you will have an clear understanding of what a phobia is and how it tends to affect individuals. Come back here next week where I will be discussing what is post-traumatic stress disorder and how it takes shape and affects an individual. If you are looking for an anxiety coach, do reach out to me. My link is in the description box below. I look forward to seeing you here next week. Have yourself a pleasant day, pleasant weekend. Bye-bye.